"If you want me to cry, I can cry," John Travolta once said. Not as a performance, but as a truth learned through experience. Few public figures have carried grief as long or as quietly as he has. Decade after decade, loss reshaped him, not in loud ways, but in slow, permanent ones. At 71, John lives with an understanding most people never reach, that life is fragile, that love is borrowed, and that nothing is guaranteed. Friends say something changed after the loss of his wife in 2020, not despair, but clarity. He became more reflective, more deliberate, more aware of time. Not morbid, not hopeless, just honest. This isn't the story of a man preparing for the end, but of someone who understands how close the end always is. John Travolta isn't running from sadness. He's learned how to carry it without letting it consume him. Where family was always the center. John Travolta's story doesn't begin in Hollywood, but inside a crowded New Jersey home filled with creativity, competition, and deep affection. His parents made deliberate sacrifices, stepping away from personal ambition to give their children stability and presence. Creativity wasn't optional in the Travolta household, it was daily life. With siblings constantly singing, acting, and performing, John learned early that expression was how love was communicated. That foundation shaped every decision he made later, especially his loyalty to family. When he left school as a teenager to pursue acting, it wasn't rebellion, it was supported courage. His family believed in him completely, and that belief became his emotional armor. Even as fame arrived, even as loss followed, John never stopped measuring success by family, not applause. That grounding explains why, decades later, his decisions still revolve around connection, not career. Fame came and went. Family stayed central. Becoming a star faster than life could prepare him. John's rise wasn't gradual, it was explosive. Television fame arrived first, turning him into a familiar face almost overnight. Then film transformed him into something larger, a cultural symbol. Saturday Night Fever and Grease didn't just succeed, they defined an era. At an age when most people are still figuring themselves out, John was carrying global expectations. He danced, sang, and smiled for millions, but privately he was still learning how to live inside that level of attention. Hollywood rewards momentum, not emotional readiness. When success comes too fast, it often skips important lessons. John learned them later, through loss instead of guidance. Still, during that early period, he worked relentlessly, proving range and commitment beyond charm. What many forget is that even at his peak, John wasn't chasing immortality. He was chasing belonging. Stardom gave him visibility, but it never replaced the deeper need for connection that had shaped him since childhood. The first loss that changed everything love arrived early for John, and so did heartbreak. His relationship with Diana Hyland wasn't a Hollywood headline romance, it was deeply personal and grounding. She saw him before the world did, and he trusted her in a way he hadn't trusted anyone else. When illness took her, John was forced into grief far too young. He stayed with her until the end, choosing presence over career at the height of his rise. That experience permanently altered how he viewed success. After Diana, fame lost its shine. He carried her encouragement forward, but also the understanding that life could take everything without warning. It wasn't just the loss of a partner, it was the loss of innocence. From that point on, joy and fear became inseparable for him. Love no longer felt safe, but he never stopped choosing it. That first loss taught him the hardest lesson early. Nothing is promised, not even tomorrow. When career success couldn't heal personal pain. As the years passed, John's professional life moved in waves, highs followed by quiet valleys. When Hollywood shifted its attention elsewhere, critics grew dismissive, but the real struggle wasn't relevance. It was unresolved grief. Loss doesn't wait for convenient timing, and John was still carrying pain when professional disappointment arrived. Yet even during career uncertainty, he didn't disappear. He kept working, learning, waiting. When Pulp Fiction reignited his career, it wasn't just a comeback, it was validation. He proved he was more than nostalgia. But unlike earlier success, this return didn't define him. By then, John understood that careers fluctuate, but loss accumulates. The applause felt different, quieter inside him. He was grateful, but no longer dependent on it. Success didn't erase pain, it simply reminded him that identity must come from somewhere deeper than public approval. That understanding would matter later more than ever. Building a family and learning how to be present, marriage and fatherhood, changed John in ways fame never could. With Kelly Preston, he found partnership rooted in support, humour and shared values. Their family life was intentionally private, structured around presence rather than publicity. As a father, John was deeply involved, protective and emotionally available. He didn't outsource parenting to convenience. He showed up. When challenges arose, especially with his eldest son's health needs, John leaned into responsibility rather than retreating. Parenthood became his anchor. Career choices became secondary to stability. That prioritization wasn't accidental, it was learned through loss. He knew what absence cost. Family wasn't just something he had, it was something he actively protected. Those years were not perfect, but they were meaningful. For a while, life felt balanced again. And then, without warning, tragedy returned. The kind that reshapes you forever and redefines what survival actually means. A loss. No parent is prepared to survive. Losing a child fractures reality in a way nothing else does. When John and Kelly lost their son, the world didn't just change, it collapsed inward. Grief became physical, daily, and unrelenting. John withdrew not out of avoidance, but necessity. Survival became quiet and inward. He focused on protecting his family, especially his remaining children, from further harm. Public life paused because private life demanded everything he had. In time, he chose to honor his son by helping others, transforming grief into service. But no amount of purpose replaces a child. That loss stayed with him, reshaping how he viewed time, safety, and love. He became more cautious, more protective, and more aware that happiness exists alongside fear. Yet even then, he didn't harden. He remained gentle, choosing compassion over bitterness. That loss didn't end his life, but it permanently altered the way he walked through it. Choosing peace over noise. In recent years, John has made choices that reflect peace rather than retreat. He has simplified, downsized emotionally, and reoriented his life around meaning rather than momentum. Travel has become about memory making, not visibility. Time with his children is sacred. Public speculation doesn't guide his decisions. What some interpret as goodbyes are better understood as gratitude. When someone has lost as much as John has, they stop postponing appreciation. He gives things away because attachment has changed. He records messages not out of fear, but out of presence. Awareness of mortality doesn't mean surrender, it means intention. John isn't preparing for the end, he's living without denial. That distinction matters. He understands that tomorrow isn't promised, but today is available. And he's choosing to meet it honestly, without drama, without illusion, and without wasting what remains on fear or regret. What his life ultimately teaches us. John Travolta's story isn't about tragedy alone. It's about how much a human being can endure and still remain gentle. He teaches us that grief doesn't make you broken, it makes you precise. That love is always worth the risk, even when it ends in loss. That survival doesn't require constant strength, only persistence. At 71, John isn't defined by what he's lost, but by what he still chooses: connection, presence, and quiet joy. His life reminds us that resilience isn't loud, it doesn't announce itself, it shows up every morning and keeps going. Fame fades, headlines change, but how we love, how we grieve, and how we continue, those are the stories that matter. John Travolta is still here, still choosing life, not because it's easy, but because he knows how fragile and precious it truly is.